And those candidates are, in alphabetical order, Sean Kerrigan, Matt Kobus, and Jim LeBlanc. We will begin tonight's program with an opening statement from each of the candidates. Each will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and Deb Gutzel will serve as the official timekeeper. And we will begin with Sean Kerrigan. Sean.
Thank you. I'm Sean Kerrigan, I'm a two-term member of your select board, and I'm running for re-election on June 12th. First, I'd like to thank Terry Gatto and our cable director, Mark McMinn, and Deb Gutzel for helping out tonight, and for everyone at home who sent in questions. I'd also like to thank Matt Kobus and Jim LeBlanc for taking part tonight. I'm really looking forward to talking about the issues facing our town. As chair of the select board for the first 2 years of the pandemic, I saw firsthand how special this town can be, as we came together in the midst of uncertainty to look after each other and keep each other safe. I saw how resilient and innovative this town can be, as we rethought how we governed, did business, and gathered as a community. I saw us deliver on the promise of a small town government that is nimble and responsive, as department heads and elected officials worked as one to make the hard decisions that took us through some of the scariest months of our lives. I learned many lessons over the past 3 years, but the biggest is that we cannot let the fear of the unknown force us from the path of progress. We've met many challenges together, but more await us. Now is not the time to turn back to old ways, however safe they appear. You deserve a select board that isn't afraid to be brave and bold, one that will do everything it can to keep Clinton moving forward. We can respect and honor our town's heritage, history, and traditions without putting Clinton in the museum. There's going to be a lot of talk tonight and a lot of promises. I urge you to go beyond rhetoric and look for results, because in this job, actions really do speak louder than words.
Thank you. Next up, Matt Kobus.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matthew Kobus, and I am seeking re-election to the Select Board, where I currently serve as chair. My hope is throughout tonight's event, I will reaffirm why I'm worthy of one of your 2 votes on Election Day, Monday, June 12th. Tonight, voters will have the opportunity to hear the perspectives and positions of the 3 candidates running for 2 seats on the Select Board. Mr. Kerrigan and I are running for re-election, having worked together the last 3 years. I encourage voters to go beyond what they are told tonight and look at the history of each candidate during their time serving the Clinton community. Did they make decisions and vote objectively? How did their decisions impact the town of Clinton financially? To what degree were they willing to collaborate with other select board members and other boards? Did they use their elected position to further a personal agenda? While you gather information about the candidates, I ask that you refer back to 2 sayings. Actions speak louder than words, and the truth of the story lies in the details. My initial campaign promises centered around accountability, transparency, resourcefulness, and being fiscally conscientious. These principles served as a guide throughout my first term, as they led me toward making informed and objective decisions for the voters of the Clinton community. During times when discussions were contentious and filled with emotion, I never veered from my promises while I kept the best interests of the taxpayers my priority. Tonight I will answer all questions to the best of my ability and my understanding, as well as with truth and sincerity. In closing, I would like to thank Clinton Cable TV for organizing and presenting tonight's events to the town of Clinton. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Now, Jim LeBlanc.
Good evening. My name is James LeBlanc, and I'm running for one of 2 seats that are up for election in this June for the Select Board. I have chosen to run in this year's election as I believe the voters of our community should always have choices with respect to whom they believe will best represent the interests of our community. My background includes more than 40 years of service, whether to country, to state, and to the community. Currently, I volunteer on the Council on Aging Board and the Old Home Days Committee. My individual history also includes 9 years on the Select Board from 2008 to 2017. I am an advocate for teamwork, and being part of a team is necessary for any community. I believe in providing department heads with the tools and resources necessary to carry out managing their respective areas. While supporting departments with their individual requests, the Select Board must be cognizant that there is not a limitless amount of funding and factor in a balanced approach across critical and operational needs and prioritizing what is needed for the community as a whole. Being part of the Select Board additionally requires balancing immediate needs while planning for the future and looking for ways to improve on longer-term goals and objectives with both short-term funding and long-term borrowing for this year and for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I will offer several questions, and each of you will have 3 minutes to respond to them. And we'll start with John Kerrigan. Question number 1. The good news is for the town of Clinton that all of you have served on the Select Board previously. So knowing that, what would you say was your greatest contribution to the board? John.
Thank you. I try and not make it a habit of looking back or about things like legacy, but if I had to think of something I'm most proud of, when I got on the board in 2017 after Mr. White chose not to run again, I was by far the youngest member on a very experienced board. Within 4 years, I was chair. It seems like a long time, but when you're on the board, that first term comes at you fast. And my background is as a reporter. I've covered scores, if not hundreds, of meetings, and I thought I, really knew what I was in for. But until you're sitting in these seats, you don't. And especially as chair, the burden is very heavy. And going into a pandemic, working with a board that was relatively unexperienced. I'm proud at how we came together and learned from each other, taught each other, and really did some great work during that time. If I had to round out the podium, I would point to some hires we made over the past few years. We created an HR position that's doing great work as far as streamlining personnel and payroll issues and making huge inroads as far as training and professional development. And we finally, after many, many years of talking about it, hired an assistant town administrator who's been doing terrific work in exactly what we had hoped that position would be, is that taking things off of the town administrator's plate and helping him do the things he's supposed to be doing. Lastly, in 2020, right before the election, I wanted to make sure I got it through before, in case I wasn't reelected, but I led the charge to change the name from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. I know for a lot of people it seems like a small thing, but for a lot of people, they did not like that change. And I really think representation matters. I think in this day and age, the language we use matters, and I'm proud that the town made that change, and that I have the pleasure of serving with 2 women who are actually 2 of only 3 who've been elected. Look forward to seeing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Matt Coates.
My greatest contribution to the board that I have served on over the last 3 years, I believe, comes down to transparency, data gathering, and teamwork collaboration. When I became chair a year ago, the first thing I did was I took the Select Board email, which had primarily been managed by the chair, and set it up so any email that came in went to all 5 members. I didn't want there to be any perception of the chair being a gatekeeper or having any control over what information was distributed to the other board members. Additionally, for the first time in the boards in the last decade, the town of Clinton has published the annual town report 3 years in a row. This transparency is imperative and integral for the taxpayers and civic engagement. When it came to making difficult decisions, I never shied away from the conversation and explaining why I made the decisions I did, because I always set out to make informed decisions. I would gather all the information that I could find to be relevant. I would bring it back to the board. I would go through it. So when it came time to make that decision, it was informed and it was objective. It did not make the decisions any easier, but at the end of the day, I believe that it's important that people understand the thought process that went into these tough decisions. And lastly would be the collaboration. I know that there's a misperception of there being a fragmented board, but at the end of the day, when we would have our discussions, when we would leave, everybody has a level of respect for one another, and we continue to look forward to working together. And this also goes with department heads. I know that it can be challenging having new board members come in with new ideas, and it's important that we gather information, we hear, and then we find the best path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Now, Jim LeBlanc.
The greatest contribution while I was on the board, during my time in office, I started in 2008, and in 2008 we had a financial meltdown of just about everything across the country, and the retirement fund took a large hit. And what we did as a board was we worked with the town administrator, and we had actuarials come in and put us back on a path of restoring the funding that went into that retirement account, which we knew would take a long time, and it was going to cost a significant amount of money per year, but we had to put the community on that plan in order to restore the funds. The other item that I am proudest of is working within the allocated budget for the Council on Aging for our senior center. I mean, we were given $1.2 million, and we have turned our facility into one of the most enviable senior centers in the entire state. It hasn't been easy. It took a long time. There were some problems with the building. We had to integrate an elevator into the building, which was a community development block grant, which helped pay for that, over and above what was allocated to town meeting. And now we have a beautiful building that is it has more programming and activities than they ever had down on High Street. I think the greatest lesson that I learned during my time on the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board, we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. It's okay to have debates and discuss topics, but it should never come down to personalities. People don't elect your Select Board members to have, disagreements and fights. It's okay to debate a topic, and that's where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with question number 2 now, and we'll begin with Matt Coates. Question 2 is, what are the major budgetary issues facing Clinton in the next few years, and what is your position on those issues? Matt.
Thank you. So, major budgetary issues that face the town of Clinton. The first one that I see at the top of the list is the growing senior population. It's projected by 2025 that approximately 2,500 people in our community are going to be 60 years old or younger on disability, or 65 years or older. In order to maintain the infrastructure and the services we provide, we cannot continue to rely on tax increases to fund them. With the portion of the population that is retired or unable to work, it is going to be, it's not going to be as easy for that population to absorb any increase in their tax. Secondly, the Clinton Middle School is in the process of undergoing consideration for either a new build or renovation. It's not going to be an option for the town of Clinton to do nothing. With that is going to come a significant budget that is going to be required to fulfill whatever the town chooses to move forward with. With that increase in the taxes, we're going to have to be creative in how we can meet the needs of our school department as well as our senior population. Currently, the Clinton currently the Clinton Public School demographics, there's approximately 50% of our student population is defined as being economically disadvantaged by the Department of Education and Secondary Education. If we continue to raise taxes, it is going to make the town unaffordable for those people who are currently living here. One item that is often talked about every year is the tax rate. And there's currently discussion between keeping the split tax rate or moving towards a single tax rate. I personally believe that we need to be cognizant of the effects that a single tax rate may have on the town of Clinton and look further into it. I don't believe that we should price commercial property out of the town of Clinton, but we have to make it both affordable and livable for both our residents and for commercial industrial property. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Jim?
The major budgetary issues facing the community, I agree with that. The school, the middle school, the building, whether it's being renovated or being rebuilt. I know there were 5 choices with regards to the choices for the middle school, none of which came with a price tag of the cost of extensions or rebuilding. And I think that in addition to reimbursement from the state or federal government, if there's going to be a reimbursement for the new construction or for renovations, what is that amount? And in order for people to make an informed decision, you have to have all of the facts. You have to have the amounts. The second item that I see as a major budgetary issue facing our community is infrastructure. Spending what we're currently spending on the existing facilities for police and fire versus building a new public safety building that would be up to standard. And I think that the community would be remiss in not looking at purchasing the St. John's property as a location for a new public safety building. I think it would be ideal, and it would address the fact that our police station was built in 1964 and our fire station was built in 1975. The third item that I see is with regards to senior housing. Currently there is a 2.5 to 3 year wait for seniors to get into public housing, and there hasn't been a significant investment in housing for our seniors since they did Chestnut Street. And I think that the state needs to step up and look at building additional housing for our seniors. And then the last item that I think is a major budgetary, we're looking at some major expenditures over the next few years. And what is the impact to our long-term borrowing and our bond rating? It depends upon how much long-term borrowing we're doing. I mean, we've done significantly well over the last several years to get our long-term borrowing down. So what's the impact of the bond rating and our ability to borrow money? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And next, Sean Kerrigan.
Thank you. Yeah, not to belabor the point, but yes, the middle school is a huge priority, and public safety perhaps too. I think the biggest issue we have is that these are just a few pieces in our surplus property puzzle that we refuse to put together. The libraries has an article in town meeting to go forward with the renovation there. That could be $15 or $20 million. We have surplus property at the old fire station and the central administrative building that we don't know what we want to do with. I feel, while everyone loves St. John's, we've drooled all over that place for years, and I feel we've lost all bargaining power as far as getting a fair deal with the church. So These are things, it's like having an estimate done on a kitchen job and having someone say, well, you just need a new stove and a new fridge because that's what we can afford now when the cabinets are falling down. I want someone to tell me how much it's all going to cost, and we look at it so we can either stagger this thing out or cross things off the list and be realistic, because we have buildings falling down right across the street. Secondly, I think we need to start really thinking about how we're going to make up for the golden goose that is the landfill. Traditionally, we get about $340,000 in infrastructure aid from the state, which by my estimate covers, if you went the Water Street project from High Street down to Main Street, not the big one that the state paid for, but the little one, that was maybe $450,000. So $340,000 does not go very far. We've been putting, over the past 3 years, thanks to the landfill surplus, we've put $4 million total, I think, into the streets and sidewalks in this town. We've done a great job of building up from the center, making it a much more walkable town, a much more pedestrian-friendly town, which is helping our downtown and helping the town altogether. But that's drying up soon, and we have to really think of how we're going to do that. And this might not be a budgetary thing, but I think it's one of those boring things that people don't realize how important it is. John Kittredge, our treasurer collector, is retiring. John went from being an elected official to an appointed official. He really helped modernize that office. Through his work and the work of the town administrator, our bond rating's gone up. We've been able to put, when I first got on the board, I think we were putting $100,000 into the stabilization fund. This will be the second year in a row, voters' approval pending, that we're putting $500,000 in. So that's, I think, assuming that goes through, about $1.2 million over the past 3 years into the stabilization fund. This is a big position. We can't hire firefighters, and we're going to have to find a treasurer collector who can continue leading that department. And again, it's one of the boring things that this board has to deal with, but you know, it's a very important position, and that's why I'm glad that the HR department's already starting to look at a major search for this, because that's a huge loss, and it's not going to be the first one. The class of '81 is turning 60 this year, and we're going to be facing a huge gap in talent.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to question 3. And this one we'll begin with Jim LeBlanc. Question 3 is, have we reached the tipping point for cannabis companies in our community?
Yes. As far as I'm concerned, just because we have the ability to authorize a license, unfortunately, this is nobody's fault. The problem is the state has changed the rules in the middle of the game. The last year that I was on the Board of Selectmen in 2016-2017, we authorized a license for 1. And we negotiated an agreement with the company to receive an X amount of money per year from the company. And then the state came back on the community and said, no, you can't do that. I'm sorry, but if we in good faith negotiated contracts with companies to come here and do business, number 1, those should be honored. The state should be. Cannabis Control Commission should not be able to change the rules of the game in the middle. Secondly, I believe that we don't need 9 licenses to be given out. I think that we could have gotten away. What we're going to see is we're going to see a saturation point, and that, I think we've already hit it. We already hear about the businesses that are currently exist, the retail, they're making pennies on the dollar. They're not going to be able to stay open very long if the competition continues to increase.
Thank you. All right, Sean Kerrigan.
Thanks. Yep, I agree. The CCC changed rules as far as host agreements midstream, and as I said in the past meeting, I won't be voting in support of anything until going forward until they sort that out, because it's not fair for us to have 2 different ways of doing business. That being said, it seems like the cannabis thing was a lot more. It was a lot more than it. It's a lot less than it was promised. We're not seeing the revenue that some people thought we were going to get.
while we've approved a lot of licenses, it's a lot more expensive and a lot more complicated getting these places open than a lot of people thought going into it. And while I'm happy to let people do their business, we knew, I think I knew voting for some of these things that they had no chance of getting off the ground. That's not my problem. What the good part of it is that hopefully in the process it's drawing attention to our mills and what can be done there. And I know the planning board was very adamant that when these licenses were approved that there was going to have to be improvements made to these buildings. And again, talking about the library or the central administrative building or the other, the old fire station, what's happening to the mills in this town, which is not only a treasure, but really the building blocks upon which this town is formed or built, they're falling down. So hopefully that draws attention to that. We have 2 retail places, so just so we understand, because we approved however many licenses we're capped at 2 retail. I'm not sure what they're doing as far as business, but everything else would be a grow facility, and I'm happy to let the market figure that out. Right now, the market is saying that they're not going to make it. So, yep, the way I look at businesses is the same way I look at High Street. Is I'm not in the business of picking and choosing. I want the garden, the soil to be fertile, and a place where anything can grow, and that's going to change from last year to this year to next year. I just want to make it a place where people want to be, and whether that's someone spending money, someone opening a business or a restaurant or a cannabis facility, I am agnostic when it comes to those things because I'm not a businessman. I'm here to make sure this town is as successful as it can be. So cannabis, we had big hopes for it, didn't work out. I'm happy to move on to the next thing.
Thank you. And Matt Dobbs.
All right, thank you. Whether the town has reached the tipping point on properties related to cannabis, it's debatable. All right. So I understand that there's neighborhoods that are not fond of their neighbors, and whether it's the smells that they're supposed to be held to eliminating. But while the Cannabis Commission has pulled the rug from underneath communities, when you look at the property down on Brook Street in Clinton, in 2000 that property sold for $650,000. 2021 that same property sold for $16.6 million. The property valuation in 2023 for that property was $14.2 million. Now, that tax revenue is substantial. So when we talk about being resourceful, finding other ways to generate revenue without having to levy them in tax increases, this is one option. There was a study that the town of Clinton had conducted, I believe it was in 2013, and one of the issues that was identified was the mill buildings that we are plentiful with. There's very few uses for those buildings when it comes to modern manufacturing. The cannabis growing industry is one industry that is able to repurpose these. Now, long term, as been pointed out, if the market becomes so saturated that these, that it starts thinning the crop, no pun intended, but if it thins it out, the town of Clinton is going to have a modernized building as far as energy efficiency, fire suppression, that it's going to make it feasible for a new business to go in there, which doesn't necessarily have to be related to cannabis. All right. So I think it's prudent that we at least explore any opportunity that comes along. And as Mr. Kerrigan pointed out, it's very expensive, but it's something that the town of Clinton doesn't have to invest in, but we are able to reap the benefits of the tax tax revenue generated from them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now enter round 2. Question 4, we start all over. This time we'll start with Sean. How do we get more local citizens involved in local government? I'm not talking now about informed. I'm talking about really getting involved in local government.
Thanks. Well, what's sad is we asked this 3 years ago, and I'm not sure the answer is any different. People don't, I don't want to say people don't care, but it's a, we don't wake up and read the paper anymore. We wake up and scroll through social media, or there are just so many things pulling at our attention that something as close as town hall can seem very far away when you're trying to get the kids out the door. And maybe you don't work in town, maybe you just moved here because you get a tremendous value on your real estate dollar. Maybe you plan on moving as soon as the kids are out of school. I don't know, but the priorities are different these days. We were brought up in a family at my house that public service was important, and this isn't something that I do to feel strong or hard. This is something I do because I think it's important that everybody contributes to the place they live in and tries to make it better. So what we've done on a practical, in a practical sense, again, our new assistant town administrator has taken over from our previous feeble Facebook manager, who was me, and she's doing it full time. So we have somebody who is attending to that. We know that a lot of people still get their information off of Facebook. So she's done a very good job about getting that up there and not making an afterthought. That unfortunately was the best I could do. We're also undergoing another website redesign, not just cosmetically, but also really looking at the user experience to make sure that people can find everything they need on that page, which is not always the case. At a certain point, I think it comes down to, it's really hard. I try and set an example, because all too often, you like to go back to the easy punchlines that, this is a job that you only get because of your last name, or who you know, or that things, town hall's not a place for everybody, it's just a place for certain people. And you have to make that part of your job, to make sure that you're reaching out to people, that they understand that they not only have a voice through you, but that they have a voice, and they have to, whether that's coming to town meeting or voting or getting involved in committees, we just have to keep hammering away at it and letting people know that they're important and this community is nothing without them. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you. So, civic engagement is something that I have spent quite a bit of time on the last 3 years in trying to build it up. When we look at the recent endeavor that the select board was looking to move forward with, which involved videotaping meetings, there was significant pushback from all boards, except for the Parks and Recreation Department, who began to video voluntarily. If you go on there, you can see that people do watch the YouTube videos. There's a little bit of an archaic theory that if people want to be engaged, they'll make their way to a meeting and they can get involved that way. And that's just not realistic with people's work schedules and family commitments and other commitments. They may not be able to walk in and attend a meeting. It doesn't mean that it's any less of a priority in their within their life, but they should have the ability to sit down when they have the time and to go back and watch a meeting. When we look at the community and economic developer, Mr. Duffy, they added a contracted position which helped to promote events in the town of Clinton. One of them being volunteer and beer. Okay, I think the more people feel connected to their community, the more likely they are going to be to come out and take and become engaged. Prior to me running for Parks and Recreation, I had submitted a letter of interest in serving on a board, and it went almost 2 years before I ever heard back. And when you look at some boards, they're made up of a very similar dynamic. There are people that serve on multiple boards. So it's trying to break into these boards to get new people involved. Unfortunately, that hasn't always been easy. Lastly, it's going to be the website and the Notify Me. We have a service that we pay for where people can go on, sign up for notifications anytime there's any meeting, and it will come right to their phone. So when the day is long and the day is busy, that notification may prompt them to say, oh, you know what, I'd like to get there for it. But until the government becomes open to civic engagement, it's going to be very difficult to generate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Okay, I have to agree with Sean in terms of family dynamics. I mean, that factors in a lot for people's schedules. You know, many kids are involved in multiple activities and trying to get, you know, if you have children, you're trying to get them to soccer or baseball or football or band practice or whatever it is that the kids are involved in. The families are already, you know, juggling school activities, meals, trying to, you know, and just getting them to be engaged with something else on top of all of that. It's almost impossible, you know, and we've had an influx of people with families moving into town. Now, I have to agree with Matthew's assessment about videotaping. Now, I, as the chairman of the Council on Aging, I sat right here at a meeting about videotaping and reported to the Select Board that the Council on Aging Board, which is a 7-member board, decided not to videotape their meetings. However, in giving it thought on my part, the following meeting, I went back to the board and we had further discussion, and we actually decided we have been taping our meetings right along. They are available on a YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. So, I mean, people can see them if they so choose. We started out with a beta test just to see what kind of a response, how many people were actually watching. And at the beginning, it wasn't a lot. But at least the meetings are being videotaped and are available to the public if they can. I mean, all meetings of a public nature are always open to the public. People are always welcome to walk in to a posted meeting. But we have started taping them, and we will continue to do so. But getting people engaged is a challenge, regardless. I will admit that I also volunteer on Thursdays for the center meal at the senior center. So I'm there for a few hours on Thursday morning helping Stephanie Suri plan the meal for the lunch for that day. And there's a sense of satisfaction you get by helping out in the community, doing something on a weekly basis, just getting something done, and making sure people are actually getting to eat.
Thank you. All right, question number 5, and this one will begin with Matt Kovas. There's been a lot of talk about the Strand Theater in downtown. And the question is, should your board be involved in the reopening of the Strand Theater? And if so, what are some ideas you might have for the place? And Matt, you'll start.
Very good. Now, is this specific to the Strand or just in general?
To the Strand. Specific
to the Strand. Thank you. So should the board be involved in the status of the Strand? I do believe so, yes. I believe we should be involved. To what level, that is something that remains to be seen. The Strand is iconic in the town of Clinton. It has a huge standing on the image of High Street. Now, growing up, the Strand was closed for most of my childhood, up until I was a teenager. And the energy that came with the Strand reopening was something that I still remember. When we received let me backtrack on that. Should the taxpayers' money be directed towards a private business? I cannot say that I would advocate on town hall floor for funding for a private business. We're in a unique situation where we have ARPA funds that were distributed to the town of Clinton which gave us the opportunity to invest in businesses to help them rebound from the impact of COVID. The entertainment industry is one that was heavily hit. I do believe that the Strand would be a worthwhile investment with these ARPA funds to ensure that the Strand continues to live on. There's been a lot of discussion and people have different ideas on what the Strand itself should be, how it should operate. I'm not a business person. I have never owned a business. That's not for myself to decide. But if an investor comes in with a business plan, it's something that we should look at. And whether we think that the business should diversify, I don't know that that's really my place as an elected official to determine. I think that's something between the business owner and the real estate owner. But we need to consider all options on keeping that Strand going, because to invest just under $4 million into High Street and a revitalization project, and to have a business like the Strand not operating would be a complete disservice to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
In terms of the Strand Theater, in the board involvement and the status of the building, I think that while the board can encourage development of the building with private business, I think that charge really needs to be led by the Community and Economic Development Director, along with the Clinton Chamber of Commerce, working with Mass Development on finding the funding that is probably more readily available through the state. Those, between Mr. Duffy and our Chamber of Commerce and Mass Development, there are more avenues for funding for businesses than we have available to our citizens. And I think we needed, as a board, to press on that group, those groups, to see what they can do to encourage reopening of the Strand. I agree, it's an important piece of our community, and I would like to see it reopened. But the reality of, I don't know that, I think a one-screen movie house will do far better than a multiplex would. I think that there's a better opportunity to run the entertainment business now that the COVID pandemic's over. But should we be using ARPA funds to support that? I'd have to wait to see what came out of Mass Development.
Thank you. And John?
Thanks. There are a couple challenges with the Strand. One is that finding someone to develop a place that they don't own is a big hurdle. It's been hard to find somebody to invest a lot of money into a place that ultimately isn't theirs. Secondly, the business model is broken. COVID certainly accelerated it, but I think it was headed that way to start. And while there's a lot of charm in seeing a movie at a place like the Strand, the simple economics of it don't work anymore. You can pay $30 and eat and drink for free at home and watch it maybe a week or two later, or even that same week it's released to the public. But also the studios are charging a lot more. From what the former owners are telling us, it used to be you could get away with, the second run films were a lot cheaper, and you could maybe get by with 20 or 30% of your gate. Now they're expecting close to 50, which is like the first run. It's my long way of saying that I believe that if the Strand's going to be successful, and I think the feasibility study we did on this is that it has to evolve into a multi-purpose space, which I think could be an even more greater value to our downtown. Unfortunately, that's going to cost money because the stage, while it's a tremendous potential, needs a lot of work. Sound system needs a lot of work. The whole place needs a lot of work. It has not been, the building hasn't been maintained like a lot of things in town the way it should be. So do I think the town should be a part of it? Yes, to a degree. Whatever we're going to put in as far as ARPA money is not going to make or break the Strand. It's a multi-million-dollar project to take it to where it should be, to where it's really going to make a difference and where it's going to be sustainable to stay open. Could we give it some CPR and get it back open for a year or two? Sure. I don't think that's what anybody wants. We want that place to be something that's going to be long-term sustainable. So every time that I've seen a municipality helping out an old theater like this, you can Google it yourself and see. It's been part of a much larger effort, whether that's a developer buying a place and starting a fundraising campaign, or a nonprofit shifting the business model and having a nonprofit take it over. I do think that we should do everything we can, but I think we need a serious partner. We can't just be throwing money at this place expecting to save it just for the sake of feeling good about it. We need to take a step back, use this as a carrot, as an incentive, say we're willing to do our part, that the community is willing to help you, but we need a serious partner who's going to look at this as a long-term project and treat it as seriously as we are, because I think everybody here knows how important the Strand is.
Thank you. All right, our last question of the evening, question number 6. We start with Jim. What plans would you have that could specifically help the senior citizens of Clinton?
Well, one plan that I would like to see is I would like to see if we could get housing, number one, housing back on the docket and work in conjunction with the state, because that wait list is just ridiculous for far too many of our seniors who need housing. Expanding programs and activities through the senior center, we have seen a tremendous growth in the number of participants at the senior center who come in not only for meals and activities, but they also come in to have, the taxes done, and they come in and meet with grief counselors and so on. I mean, the list is just continuing to grow as the population is growing. And by the way, I'm one of those people. So I'm participating in some of my own activities, which I'm perfectly fine with. I think that the better we do and the better we communicate about the activities and the programming and the resources that are available through our senior center, our seniors will do better. I think that's probably the best starting point we have. I think that one of the things that we need to look at is some of the volunteer activities. We could consider seniors for the tax work-off program for volunteering in some of the areas that volunteers could serve.
Sean.
Thanks. It's a pretty open-ended question, so I'll do my best. As a card-carrying member of the ARP, I'm going to do everything I can to stop those robocalls about the Medicaid, because I'm not on Medicaid A or B. I'm 55 or 54 and a half, so I feel your pain. More seriously, I get them every day. More seriously, Jim's right about housing. Unfortunately, it's, and we've talked about it, they may be using the old Legion property. I think it's something we're all in favor of. It's just, again, finding a developer who's willing to bite the bullet there. We have to figure out ways to incentivize them, whether that's through state or federal programs, but that's a no-brainer, and we just need to be doing more as far as finding ways to get that across the finish line, because nobody's going to do it for free, unfortunately. As far as affordability, I have a different view than everybody else up here. I've been pushing toward that tax split, getting a little closer. We're never going to get a single tax rate, but I really think that the tax split was kind of a political con that they let us do back when Prop 2.5 came along, and it let politicians say, hey, we're lowering your tax rate, when in fact, in a town like this, it's maybe doing a lot more long-term hurt than it is good. Because I remember, and I don't remember as much as people of a certain age, but I think when we think back to the good old days, we think the same thing that we want now, which is a downtown that's diverse as far as what it offers. I mean, we're never going to have Woolworths and the Grants again, but like a place where, I mean, I really appreciate that I can go to the hardware store, I can go and get a coffee and a muffin with my kid, I can, you know, hopefully go to the movies again. We have an incredible diverse range of restaurants. You should be able to take care of everything in a town like this. You should be able to have places where you can work and have a diversity of housing stock where you can get everything from your first condo out of college to a starter home to a place where you raise your kids and to a place where you can retire, where you can close to your grandkids. So we should be able to have that kind of housing stock for everybody here. And I think sometimes when we think about seniors, again, there's a lot of fear-mongering going on, but I think they think back to the same Clinton that we want now, which is a place where we have it all here and we get a great bang for your tax dollar. And so what we have to do is just, instead of focusing on year to year, like we have to, you know, we can't do this year because that's going to do this. Step back and think of what's best for everybody here, and make some decisions that are hard to make, but again, the right ones to make.
Thank you. And Matt, last but not least here.
Thank you. I believe a plan to help the senior citizens of Clinton is going to be to strengthen the programs that currently exist up at the Council on Aging, Council of Aging. So, for example, I think during the pandemic, and being able to hear what the Council on Aging was doing from the director of the COA, you know, there are a lot of elderly people who don't have the family network and structure that we may be kind of reflecting back on to our days when you had an extended family that was around, so you had people that could take help out giving rides to doctor's appointments or any other type of appointment. And that is something the COA has done a great job in helping to fill the gap. When the seniors were at home during COVID, whether it was through medical check-ins, delivering meals, you know, we're very lucky to have the programs that we have in town. And on top of strengthening those, you know, I know the housing is an issue in the state of Massachusetts. And until there's an incentive for people or builders to help construct senior housing, you know, it's going to be very challenging to make that happen. So again, looking at how other communities are doing it before us, and we can basically take some of the best of everything and put it together, and hopefully it becomes a feasible opportunity for us to provide additional housing. You know, the wait list, I know the wait list in town right now for senior housing and subsidized housing is long, and it can be an arduous process to actually get in. But in the meantime, you know, I think we have to continue looking at the programs that exist. As Mr. LeBlanc mentioned, when it comes to programs like for those individuals that are going to be on Social Security. I have several family members who have utilized the service and were raving about how much it took off their plate and how less stressed they were at the end. And I think it's, that the monthly packet that comes out with all the programs that are at the COA, it shows. Thank you.
All right, we will now conclude tonight's program with a 2-minute closing statement from each of our candidates, starting with Sean Kerrigan. Sean.
Thanks again to Terry, Mark, and Deb for helping out, and for Matt and Jim for taking part. I really enjoyed talking about issues. Just some quick housekeeping. A week before the election on June 6th, it's town meeting. That's where we decide the budget. We also have some new policies and bylaws I think we're deciding, and a bunch of capital projects. It's the purest form of democracy, and I know it sounds hokey, but it's the first form of democracy in America. So please try and make it a point to come out and help decide where the town's going to go in the next year. To do that, you have to register to vote. The last day to register to vote is this Friday, May 26th, in the town clerk's office. A couple things that we didn't cover that I really think are important. Everyone knows the work we've put in downtown. It is very much a work in progress. We've committed money to a downtown coordinator who's done an outstanding job as far as planning events. And again, the thing about a downtown is people want to be there. And so we're trying to make it as fun and as appealing to people, as many different people as we can. She's done a great job at that. She's also going to be working on some more targeted recruitment. I said before that I don't decide what goes there, but I think the professionals in that office know this space would be good for that, or maybe they can just broker deals a little bit better than we have in the past. I'm really excited to see what she's going to do next year. I'm really proud of the work we've done creating a climate, not just downtown, but throughout the business, so much so that the Worcester Chamber of Commerce came to us about a year ago about putting a Clinton Chamber back together. I'm thrilled they're here as great advocates, and we also have a lot of work to do on Sterling Street, the former Supernaut property. Email me or check out my website, I'll get you more. I'm Sean Kerrigan. I love this job. I'm up for re-election on June 12th, and I hope you give me my vote. Give me your vote.
Thank you, Sean. Next up, Matt Kobus.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Mr. Kerrigan and Mr. LeBlanc for coming out this evening. I know that it's not always possible to meet the candidates due to involvement. But for the last decade, I've had the honor and privilege of serving the town of Clinton in a variety of roles, which include as a teacher in the Clinton Public Schools, where I'm in my 11th year, as a former member of the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Fuller Field Commission, and as a volunteer in the Clinton Little League and Clinton Youth Softball programs, where I'm in my 5th year as a league president. When I pulled my nomination papers for the Select Board in the spring of 2020, I chose to do so knowing the times were going to be unique and uncertain due to the pandemic. Throughout the last 3 years, there have been great strides made within this town, both in the community and within the town hall. The Downtown Revitalization Project has provided the town of Clinton with a fresh canvas to make a masterpiece. The energy and the buzz within the Clinton community is strong, and the momentum has the town moving ahead to no longer being the best kept secret of central Massachusetts. If re-elected on Monday, June 12th, I pledge to continue serving the Clinton community with values centered around accountability, transparency, resourcefulness, and being fiscally conscientious. I will continue to make the taxpayers of this community the #1 priority. On June 12th, I humbly ask for one of your 2 votes in order to keep this momentum moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Jim LeBlanc.
I would like to thank Mark McBean and the Director of Community and Community TV and our moderator, Terry, for putting this program together so that our community can make an informed decision. I want to thank Sean and Matt for participating, and for Deb Goodsell for being a good timekeeper and keeping us on track. The work we do today is the foundation for what happens, not just next year, but longer term. And the board needs to be mindful of just not the immediacy of the work, but what is accomplished and how it will impact the community in 5 or 10 years from now. Just as we give credit to previous boards who served before us that laid the foundation for a lot of the changes that we have seen as of late. We are extremely fortunate in our community that we still have citizens who have interest to participate in not just elections, but volunteering for various boards and committees. You know, the interest may not translate to a position on a board or a committee, but there is some interest. With almost 11,000 registered voters in our community, it is my sincere hope that as many who can will come to the town hall on Monday, June 12th from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. and cast their votes for people who they believe will best represent the needs of the community as a whole. I am asking voters for their consideration for 1 or 2 votes that you are being asked to cast in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for participating tonight. I have a final announcement, which was most of you made already. I'm sure that we all know this. I want to remind everyone of some very important dates coming up. And that, of course, is Monday, June 5, is the annual town meeting. That's at 7 o'clock right here in the town hall. The following Monday, that's June 12, is the annual town election. And that is held from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., once again here at the town hall. However, if you wish to participate in either one of those very special events, you must be a registered voter. And you can only do that at the town clerk's office right here in the town hall by Friday, May 26. The office closes at 5 p.m. and Friday, May 26 is the deadline for you to actively participate in town meeting and this very important election. So finally, I want to thank Mark and Deb for all of their work, and gentlemen tonight with some great answers. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry. Take 2.